Many founders mistakenly assume that finding the right pitch deck template and filling it in will result in a successful fundraise. This myth is propagated by dozens of pitch deck articles and coaches that proclaim their template to be everything you need to raise investor funds. But pitch deck templates don't raise funds. Fundable companies do. Pitch decks should tell a story of your fundable startup that captivates, validates, and motivates. Pitch deck templates can be a useful starting point, but founders shouldn't just fill in the blanks because that rarely tells a captivating, compelling story. Entrepreneurs need to customize the template to tell you a unique story about your startup. That starts with designing a story flow, then building the detail needed to support the plausible claims you make in your pitch. I'm Sam Wong, a startup CEO coach. This video is a quick fireside chat between me and Griffin Hermes, a principal with Pegasus Angel Accelerator, about creating a pitch deck that is clear, concise, comprehensive, catchy, and compelling. Let's dive in.
Awesome, guys. So first of all, appreciate everyone joining. I'm going to introduce myself, and then we'll have Sam introduce himself, but would love for everyone to either raise a hand or put questions in the chat as we go through, and we'll try to open it up as much as possible. Some background on myself. I'm a principal at Pegasus Angel Accelerator. We are spun out of Tech Coast Angels here in Santa Monica. We're writing $120,000 checks, in-person accelerator here to early stage industry agnostic founders. Previous to that was at a few different accelerators and a first employee at a startup. Maybe for a why should you listen to me? It's been pitched more than probably 3,000 times and seen a lot of decks. Before I throw it over to Sam, as you guys probably already know, focus for today, why startup pitch deck templates do not work. Sam, do you want to give a quick introduction here and then we can get it kicked off?
Sure. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Wong. I run a company called Fundable Startups. We are a consulting and advisory company. We do a lot of training. We run a training academy for founders. I have had the blessing or the curse, depending on how you look at it, of going through 5 different startups. The first 2 startups did shut down, unfortunately, even though they were both viable. The last 3, thankfully, were acquired. And since leaving the company that acquired startup number 5, I have been back in the startup space, trying to help founders basically avoid the mistakes that I made. As an engineer, I believe in repeatable processes, and our goal is to help founders become fundable, raise funds, scale, and exit.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. And then before we jump in, I'll just kind of set the backdrop as to this topic. You know, half of the articles that I see on pitch decks are pushing out this, the perfect pitch deck template for B2B SaaS, the perfect healthcare pitch deck template. That continues to be pushed and really is more of clickbait stories. Our bottom line here that we want to get across is that pitch decks don't raise funds. Fundable companies do. And really telling the story of your fundable company. We want to focus on both captivating, validating, and motivating when looking at a pitch deck. And that's definitely what I look for, as well as other investors. And so looking at that, we'd love to jump into it here. Sam, in regards to the title, why do you think pitch deck templates don't work?
Yeah, so I think there's an over-reliance on pitch deck templates as a whole. The template themselves are not bad, but too many people are taught, 1, and 2, have bought into the partial story that the template unlocks future fundraising, and it doesn't. A template can certainly help, but the reality is, if you look at stats from companies, a lot of venture capitals firms, they basically fund somewhere around 1 out of 400 pitches that they receive. Okay, that's not a lot. It's a quarter of 1%. And there's lots of challenges that a VC will face. And they really need to be able to find the companies that truly stand out. If 90% or well more than 90%, if 99.75% really of pitch decks fail, and 90% of those pitch decks are built using a template, that basically says the template is not enough. You need more.
Excellent. And then just to touch on when thinking about story, I almost think before we jump into why storytelling and how to have a beginning, middle, and end that's compelling, how do you define storytelling before we jump into it, Sam?
Well, that's a great question. I'd say storytelling is the art and science of engaging your audience into a story that you want to be able to share with them so that they lean in or are paying attention and they take something away from what you just shared. If you, I think a great analogy of storytelling is the movie industry. Lots of people do enjoy watching movies, and lots of movies are made. If you go out to a movie review site like Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, you'll see that not all movies are great movies. There are lots of really mediocre and substandard movies. And what I really see is that what are the key elements of the movies or of the stories that stand out? And there are some key ingredients and things that we focus on. We have a storytelling class that is built around, well, one pillar that it's built on is the movie industry and telling stories through film and how you can adapt some of those stories in your startup storytelling to engage your audience.
Excellent. And one thought I have as well is, you know, you want your pitch as well as your story to be unique, something that using A16Z's best templates of 2023 can sometimes result in is trying to fit your startup into a cookie cutter
That's right.
run through where the problem that you're illuminating and the solution just seem like the same of the last five pitch that you've heard this morning and the next five. And I
Right.
think people really want to remember, venture, you need N of ones. You need really unique, disruptive ideas for it to really scale to the ability that, returns and makes sense for the fund. And often, I don't want to pick on anyone here, but another food delivery service or something along those lines where you're going against huge players can be a significant challenge. And you have to have, real differentiators. And often that template is not going to highlight those differentiators because you're
Right.
fitting your thing into into someone else's thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
So
absolutely right. I mean, if you and every other founder is using a template, which is probably the case, most founders do download a template. If all you do is fill in the template, that makes you equal or on par with every other founder out there. There's nothing necessarily that has you standing out, and that's what you really need to be able to do is be memorable. So I look back to a quote that the poet and activist Maya Angelou had. Her quote was, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." That's the key thing is that when you are pitching to an investor audience, that investor has probably seen a dozen pitch decks that day. I spent time working at Berkeley Skydeck as an advisor, and Skydeck is having their demo day in about 9 days, okay, 8 days or so. And we've been trying to get the founders geared up to be able to do the pitches and stuff. In that demo day, there's going to be almost 20 different pitches. Okay. You've got to find a way to be able to stand out. And it's not going to be, oh, we had this stat, we had this metric. Look, the line is going up and to the right because every other founder has a slide that with a line that goes up and to the right. You have to find a way to make yourself memorable and to connect with what people are, with their emotions
yeah,
and make yourself memorable in that way.
yeah, I think you hit it on the head, and I think it's really about resonating and then almost pulling back some wool and allowing the investor to see something different that maybe they hadn't seen before
Mhm.
or is a different way of tackling the problem. With that being said, to zoom in a little bit on really the core components of storytelling, Sam, just can you just talk a little bit on really learning to tell a story and what those core elements are.
Yeah, there are five measures or five goals that we encourage storytellers or founders to be able to try to adapt. Um, you have to be clear, you have to be concise, you have to be comprehensive, you have to be catchy, and have to be compelling. Okay. The first one is actually quite important, clarity. All right. And I've seen, as a former pitch judge, I serve as a pitch judge typically about once a month or so. Um, I can't tell you how many times when we're listening to a pitch, sometimes the judges, especially if it's an online pitch, they're IMing each other in the background saying, "Do you understand what he's saying? I don't get it." Okay. And we've got judges who are Harvard MBAs and they're sitting here scratching the head like, "I don't get it." So what that really says is that too many founders fall down when it comes to clarity. And if the investor doesn't understand after 1 minute, if they don't understand what you do, then everything you say is going to be, discounted. It's going to be negated. All right. So being clear is absolutely essential. Being concise is very hard because most pitches have maybe four, at most 5 minutes to deliver. Okay. So learning how to share what you need to share in a clear and concise way is very, very difficult. So a lot of what we do oftentimes when we help founders with building their pitch decks, we end up rewriting a lot of the content. In fact, probably 2/3 of our energy, time, and effort is spent rewriting founder content because founders tend to pile on too much stuff in an effort to be comprehensive. And if you can find a way to be catchy, that certainly helps with you being more memorable. Okay.
Yep. And uh, I was going to highlight a little bit of this in a previous chat that we had, Sam, but I think now is just a great time. Looking at being clear and concise, which even from my experience, I've had the most complicated deep tech AI pitch that was explained to where, a first grader can understand it. It's kind of
Yeah.
like typing in what is quantum physics. Please explain it to a fifth grader in ChatGPT. And I love doing that with lots of different
Yeah.
examples. But I went and pulled some of the most successful companies ever and on their pitch decks going all the way back. And just to
Hmm.
read through even three of them, we have Airbnb, Uber, and Tinder. Either the first slide or the second slide, I'll just go through them. So for Airbnb, it is a web platform where users can rent out their rooms to travelers, save money while traveling, and make money while hosting. That's it, right? Uber, one-click car service, faster and cheaper than a limo, nicer and safer than a taxi. Tinder, like people around you, get connected if they like you too. So right, these are, it's almost hyperbolized how simple they're putting these. I think of it a lot like product and like minimum viable product, where if you can have the front of your product do what you said it's going to do, the back of it can be hundreds of wires disconnected, you scrambling and manually doing everything. If the user is experiencing one-click car service, you've delivered what you said. And often that can be the requirement before getting significant amounts of funding to prove it on the back end. But not to go on too much of a tangent there. I just love the simplicity of those
Yeah.
decks. Um,
Yeah.
any thoughts on that, Sam? Or we can kind of keep cruising here.
Yeah, those are beautiful. It's kind of funny because sometimes people, when they're trying to even introduce the company, for example, on their title slide of the deck, they'll put a tagline, and that tagline might just describe our fourth company, the fourth startup was our first time CEO. Our tagline was knowledge, value, and reliability. We wanted to highlight the three things that we felt differentiated us. But if you put that on the very first slide of your pitch deck when you're trying to fundraise, knowledge, value, reliability, your audience is going to be like, so what do you do? You could be, writing a software application. You could be deep tech. You could be trying to, solve cancer. Who knows what that you do? So the doing your tagline is usually the wrong thing to do. You need to explain at the very start your short description, and that's what characterized all three of those short descriptions that Griffin just read from. They all explain in 15 seconds or so what the company does, and most people can understand it.
Yeah, well said. Now, we just highlighted some of the greats. Now to go to the other side of this, um, common mistakes that you see founders making with their pitch decks, and this can be both on the content side and on the pitch side. And I'm happy to kind of elaborate and jump in as well on the back end of this.
Yeah, I'd say the most common mistake is probably the first one is that most people are not clear. Then the second most common is that they're not concise, they're too wordy. I say maybe half of the pitches I see usually run out of time in a pitch competition. Okay. That says that they're not sufficiently concise. Okay. And I'd say maybe so the top three, gosh, it's so hard to just limit it to three. I might just say let me do top five. Not being clear, not being concise, not being about your business. Too many pitch decks spend way too much time talking about the product. That's fine for your end customer, but when you're trying to pitch an investor, what you should be focused on is the business. Explain enough about the product so that the investor understands, but the bulk of the content should be about the business. And then I'd say not really focusing on what the investor cares about in terms of making sure it's de-risking, that the typical threats to a company have been de-risked, and you've shown how you've de-risked it in the company. And then the last thing I would say is maybe taking a step back is not getting quality help early enough. There are too many founders I've seen who already well into their pitch process. They've spent, dozens and dozens of hours, 50, 80, 100 hours trying to build their pitch deck, reach out to investors, and they're not getting traction. That 50, 100 hours, that's a lot of time, energy, and effort. It's worth something. Getting help early can definitely make you much, much more productive. So those would be the five things. Not clear, not concise, not focusing on the business, not talking about what the investors care about, and not getting help early enough.
Yeah, definitely. And two things that I'll add to it, maybe a little bit more zoomed in. In regards to the problem, I love the word unlock, like or fit in. What does basically your business in between a customer and a problem? Like I'm imagining two pieces of brick fitting perfectly together.
Hmm.
Elaborating and really illustrating what is your business unlocking for the user in solving a problem. That's one. Something else I heard last week that I think it's a fine line, and I'll explain why, but almost irrational confidence, which needs to come from a place of doing the pre-work, knowing your customer, knowing your problem, right?
Mhm.
Irrational confidence without self-awareness is that's going to be a problem, and you might come
Right.
off, arrogant. But again, if you go back to some of the greatest founders of all time, like they are almost crazy with how they think about their problem and just their mission to solve it, and really exuding and demonstrating that to an investor can go a lot further than you may think.
Mhm.
And the opposite of that is if people are kind of fumbling through, not answering questions directly, that's a
Oh
huge
boy.
thing as
Yeah.
well. But exuding a high level of confidence paired with knowledge or paired with self-awareness, I think is a significant selling point that founders may not even realize they are doing or not. But often when I look at some of the checks that we're writing, that it's going to those founders. So just the
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing is confidence is great, but you also mentioned having it rooted in knowledge and self-awareness. So you don't want to just be confident without those things, because then you start looking like you're faking it, okay, and hoping that you will eventually make it. That usually doesn't go over well. That confidence should be rooted in the understanding that These are the when an investor asks a question, you have to look to where they're trying to go. There's a classic, the classic Wayne Gretzky comment: "You skate to where the puck is going to be." Okay, the investor asks questions because they have a specific concern or thing that they're trying to discover. As you put yourself in the investor's shoes, then you can answer that question more authoritatively and with confidence. The other issue about self-awareness is making sure, in essence, understanding that you're not just there to cheerlead, and it's not about I don't think any substantive investor writes a check based on how much you believe in the story and your startup. They'll write a check based on how well they believe you're going to do a good job on running a profitable company. So when they ask you questions, they're trying to tease out whether they believe in you that you can get the job done. So that the empty bluster of if you don't know something, you start kind of trying to fill in the blanks and make it sound like you know, that just, and most investors see right through that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And often the question and how clearly you can answer the question of why are you the one to solve this problem pairs perfectly with how digestible and valid that level of confidence seems, right? I like jelly beans. Should I go start a jelly bean factory? Well, have I worked in the candy industry or confectionery for the last 20 years and saw into like, no. So maybe I shouldn't go do that. Now, does that mean you can't solve a problem that you haven't directly worked for or had some past experience? No, it doesn't mean that, but you just better have a valid reason why you and why now, right? Um, so with that being said, Sam, pitch decks are great. Pitch decks illuminate the
Mhm.
business, right? In the best of light to
Mhm.
communicate that value and the significance of the problem and the solution to an investor. How does fundability factor into the fundraising process?
You know that you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation here is that that's pretty critical that a fundable company raises funds. It's something that gets lost in the over rotation on pitch decks. Okay, so fundability is going to be absolutely key. Before our advice to founders has always been before you spend too much time on fundraising, make sure you diagnose and evaluate your fundability. If you don't know how to do that, we're happy to help with that. We do that a lot, okay, which is why our company is called Fundable Startups. But fundamentally, the more fundable you are, the more likely it is that you'll get traction with investors. Trying to go out to talk to an investor before you're truly fundable is largely going to be an exercise in futility. Okay, so our goal is, when we do a pitch deck, one of the reasons why one of the line items on the benefits is a fundability diagnostic, so that we can help you with the deck and put the deck together in a way that we think is unique and effective, especially since our focus is on fundability and we've been the founder, we've been an investor, we are also been a coach helping lots of founders through accelerators. But if you're fundamentally marginally fundable, we want to point that out so that we don't just only help you with the deck, but we help you with the most important thing that will probably help you raise funds. And that's making
Yep.
sure that you've addressed the threats that might scare an investor off.
Yep. One other thing, and I'll pair this with an example of founder was across from my office and my door was open and I heard him pitching yesterday.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, Doing also the pre-work of making sure you're reaching out to the proper investor at the
Hmm.
proper stage your business is at. I know we could have a whole nother chat about this,
Right, right.
but just as simply as possible, let me explain what I overheard. I overheard there were two USC students, confident guys. I'm sure they're going to be building something great, but going to be building is one of the key words there. They do not have a product. They don't have an MVP. They have essentially nothing, and they were pitching a Series A healthcare founder. I'm sorry, healthcare investor, and it was a tough pitch. It was a little bit cringy of them mostly asking for money, not having a lot of answers to the questions. You know, I think that pitch would have gone a lot different if they had done the pre-work, realized the previous investments that that company has made and the stage, I'm sorry, that that firm has made and the stage that firm
Hmm.
invests at. And knowing, hey, if I'm that early, okay, well, I need to go to a friends and family. I need to go to angels that have an interest in my field, that maybe have an exit, that have worked at previous or supplementary companies. Um,
Hmm.
versus just saying, I'm going to blindly email everyone. If someone takes a meeting, even if they're a Series B investor and I don't have a product, you can
Right, right, right.
guarantee how that meeting is going to go every time. And you may have lost your opportunity to meet with them in the future as well. So just a thought there. Couple of
Absolutely.
questions here. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
No, go ahead. Yeah, dive in. Let's go to the
Um,
questions.
yep, a couple of questions here. Sue, do you want to just jump in and ask here, and then we can kind of we can riff on it?
Feel free to unmute, Sue, if you'd like.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, I've been advised that safes are, the most common, understandable, form of insurance right now, especially when, the valuation is difficult to determine. Our
Mhm.
patent is pending. Our valuation will be far more solid when we, can accomplish certain things that we want to do with this early stage.
Mhm.
So is that also your understanding that safes are accepted and comfortable for our target family offices?
Yeah, so the safe is a piece of is a funding vehicle. Okay, funding vehicles are one of the four types, four components of a funding strategy. I mentioned it in the chat window. The other three are approach, sources, and targets. The reason I get into this context is that safes, yes, if you zoom in super close, yes, safes are the most common early stage funding vehicle today. It used to be convertible notes, but now it's migrated to safes by probably a 4-to-1 factor. So more than 80% of funding, early stage funding is done on a safe today. However, you need to understand the nuance, okay? Safes tend to have a lower dollar amount. The average dollar amount for safes is between $15,000 to $25,000. I notice you're in biosciences. Uh, Bioscience tends to need to raise a lot of money, and the dollar amounts raised per investor tend to be larger. So depending on what part of the industry that you're in and how far along you are, you may run into more traditional investors who invest in biosciences who would prefer a convertible note. So the convertible note has more teeth than a typical safe. So the average traditional investor, especially when they're writing a larger check, might lean more towards a convertible note. So the issue is a lot more nuanced than just, oh, the the um the the global planet is warming. Everybody's getting hotter. Okay. Well, what about this specific location here? So you kind of have to look at microclimates a little bit rather than just blanket statements and, go with the large herd, because part of your approach needs to be customized for what you are doing and the type of company that you are building. So what may be right for the company next door may not be right for you, and you need more customized and custom tailored advice. I'd need to know a little bit more about where you're at, et cetera, to provide more specifics.
And Sue, if I could just throw something your way, and I'm going to bet that there are people in this chat, and I definitely know that there are founders in general. I'd love to ask you this question and hear your opinion, and then we can have Sam come over the top. Um, you know, it sounds like you're in a similar conundrum to a lot of hardware, to a lot of biotech, whether that's an FDA approval, whether that's having 1 million units ready to sell. Of if this happens, then all of our wildest dreams come true, and the company goes to millions of dollars in sales. Um, and that can be getting through an FDA approval, getting through trials. In hardware, that can be, hey, I have one prototype, I need 50,000 so I can sell to market. The solution to those problems is often a significant amount of money. How do you think about telling the story of how do you think about communicating to investors, if this, then that, without making it too lofty, or really, and making sure you're differentiating it from a lot of the other options that an investor has? Maybe that, I don't want to go too hard on you here, but I'd love to hear that answer. And then Sam, if you can kind of follow up with your thoughts as well.
Well, I did my first live pitch last Thursday night, and
Awesome.
our larger ask is fairly small for a biotech. You're right, but with $2 million is our big ask at this point. We can, in 12 to 18 months, deliver some really solid data. So my final slide is I've created, because it's a uterine fibroid drug, it's women's health. Women's health is hot right now.
Mhm.
I've created what I've called my women's club, which is $25,000 and up safes. So that may not get us the 2 million, but it's going to keep gas in the engine while we're going after the government grants and all the other things
Sure.
where we can get the bigger money. So that was the strategy, and it looks like I got one out of this
Okay.
last pitch. So maybe.
So that's
Excellent.
great to hear.
Go ahead, Sam.
If your near-term ask is it 2 million, or is there a intermediate goal that's a little bit lower?
We really need the 2 million.
Okay.
There are a number of things we need to do, but yes, we need to pay the consultants as we go along. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't have to pay dollars this month, but I have to pay several $1,000s this month.
Sure, sure. Completely understand. It sounds like with where you're at, most early stage companies will use a convertible instrument, either a convertible note or a safe. When it comes to safes, it's either a pre-money safe or a post-money safe. And then there are multiple variants underneath each of those. Okay. Um, what I would say is that if you're trying to raise 2 million and the average dollar amount of a safe is below 25,000, that's going to be a lot of safes that you have to hunt and pursue. Okay. It's a little bit tough to, withdraw $100 from the bank a penny at a time. Okay. You're going to have to go to lots of banks or go back in line and get another penny, etc. That may be an extreme example, but you will likely have to have lots of conversations. Okay. I'm glad you got some traction. Just be aware that if you use a post-money safe, that variant of the safe increases founder dilution. The post-money safe is now much more popular than the previous version, a pre-money safe. Okay. Most founders don't even know the difference between a pre-money and a post-money safe. And there's some legal language differences. There are also, the key thing is going to be the way that dilution is calculated. Okay. And if you do lots of post-money safes, you're going to incrementally dilute yourself more and more and more when compared to a pre-money safe. So just be mindful and wise. Make sure you model your dilution, and that takes some time and expertise to be able to do that. There are some tools that will help, but you need to be able to do that because there have been plenty of situations where founders who've stacked up a dozen or 2 dozen or more post-money safes, when it's time for those safes to convert into preferred stock, founders can get shocked that, oh my God, I've now relinquished 50% of the stock of the company. I didn't think it was going to be that high. I thought it was going to be in the high 30s or mid 30s. And just because they didn't model the dilution, they come back and then they're in a bad situation because they're immediately on track to have a poor outcome financially for all the hard work that you're putting in.
Yeah. And one other thought for Sue, and Sam, I'd like to get your take on this as well. Taking the 2 million, obviously we've commented on breaking that up into $25,000 pieces. Sue, I also saw your note in the chat here. Some of those may be bigger, and I think that's great. What is your, focusing on the word conciseness, right? What is your thoughts, Sam, on, hey, Mr. Investor, or Mrs. Investor, we need $2 million.
Mhm.
At a bare minimum, I've broken this up into pieces, and 500K gets us our first trials.
Mhm.
750K gets us in front of the FDA on, et cetera. What are, at least from my perspective, I would like someone to be able to go into nuance. Maybe if I'm asking that
Mhm.
question in a pitch, but it shows that they know their business, and it shows, hey, I can't write a $2 million check. I can write a $120,000 check at our accelerator. What does that get me? Oh, well, that gets you 50% of the way to our first milestone versus 2% of the way to 2 million, right? Any thoughts on that, Tim?
Absolutely. I think you're touching upon some great advice here. The former global managing partner for Sequoia Capital, Doug Leone. Doug was on the board of one of my first startup. Okay. So Doug has a quote where he says, raise the least amount of money as late as possible because those funds that you raise early on are going to be the most expensive funds you'll ever raise. Raise the amount that you need to get to a point where you can show an investor that you've done something of value to them. So I think what where I'm going here is I think what Griffin had mentioned is you don't want to say, hey, if we raise 500,000, then we're going to be able to hire 3 people. The investor doesn't really care about that for the most part. What you should do is say, I'm going to raise 500,000 because it will get me this investor care about outcome. We're going to be able to start phase 1 clinical trial. We're going to submit, um, to hit this regulatory milestone. Or if we raise $100,000, we'll be able to convert our, you know, we have a wait list of 25 people waiting for our product. And if we raise $100,000, then our projection, we're going to get five of those 25 to sign a customer agreement and become paying customers. So talk about how the dollar amount you're going to raise is going to get you to something that the investor can feel confident that, yeah, you're making good progress.
Excellent. I know we are past time here. I think we have another 8 minutes that we can push it. Brad, I want to throw it over to you. Would love some clarity on the question and kind of what you're doing in 20, 30 seconds, and then we can try to give some opinions there.
Sure. So my name is Brad Chalou. I'm CEO of I Live On Corporation. You can hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in Redmond, Washington. I'm not in Australia. Yeah. Okay. So the company is I Live On Storyteller, which is interesting because you're saying, present with stories. So we've actually built the system. We took the time to actually build something with a whole bunch of customer feedback, a number of iterations of what we've done, improvement. I took Sam's advice. It's taken us a lot more time, of course, doing that. So, but now we're in a situation where I presented the other day to a VC I knew, and she listened to it very nicely, and she said, if I was you, I'd just start with one slide of what you do, followed with the demo. Since it all works, just hit us with the demo and show us what you do, and then one more slide perhaps after that with some other summary or whatever, and stop. Use your time up that way. What's your opinion on that?
So you ask 10 different investors slash pitch advisors, you probably get 12 different responses and opinions. Okay. I don't have a problem at all with what the advice that you got. I think that absolutely could work to certain investor audiences, and that was that person's preference. I, at the risk of sounding overly prescriptive, the answer really is, how do you want to tell the most effective story? If you think about a movie, in essence, what the suggestion you got was from a movie director or movie producer who said, Star Wars had a great beginning. You ought to implement the same type of beginning to your movie that Star Wars implemented. And the answer is, yeah, you could. Okay, that has worked for Star Wars and many other movies. Okay, but it's not the only way to be able to do it. So I'm not going to say that person's advice was right or wrong. I do know from the times that we've talked before in the past that I think it is quite possible for you to make an emotional connection, given the fact that what you do, you're capturing the life stories of individuals.
Yes.
And since an emotionally intelligent person today should understand that one of the most beneficial things about our life here is making a connection with people.
Right.
Your platform can do that. Okay.
Yes.
You're helping
Yep.
people to make a connection. And if you highlight that, and if you have an emotionally intelligent audience, they will probably remember that better than just, here's my startup, here's the numbers, if we turn this dial, the
Yep.
line goes up
Yep.
and to the right, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. You need to have that for due diligence purposes.
Sure.
But I do think you do have an opportunity, what you do, Brad, to tell a connecting story. It could be possible to do that with a demo.
Yep. Yep.
I think that's very, very possible. It kind of depends on how you want to present the story and how that will eventually lead to the next part of it is de-risking. Because that's why I'd say, I think for the most part, you have a compelling story from what I understand of your
Yep. Yep.
business. What I would focus on is at that point, the de-risking
Right. Okay.
content for the
Got it.
slides.
That's good. Griffin, I'll send you a LinkedIn message and maybe we can connect if you'll get it in a minute. So I know you probably get 5 million of these messages, but I thought I'd just try and stand out by actually
No, yeah, I'm not that cool yet. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Absolutely, I'll take a look at it. Just to kind of bring it all whole here. Sam, looking at what you guys do, I'm a founder. I got some value today. How can I engage with you, and what does that look like as far as both helping fundraise and on the pitch deck side of things? Do you guys use templates?
Yeah, we actually do use templates, even though we've talked about how to be careful not to over rely on them. Templates have a purpose, all right? But to answer your question, if you want to have a follow-up conversation, let me put into the chat window. There's a link there where you can kind of book an initial consultation with us. And we also have a lot of online training, which is what we started our company doing. Since we went through so much pain going through the 5 different startups, what we found is that when we took a step back, there were a number of patterns that consistently emerged in the startup journey. And what we tried to do is what we've done is build out the training content to help you overcome the common hurdles that most founders face. So we do encourage people to take a look at some of our training. It's a very cost-effective way compared to live interactive coaching because that's tends to be just a little pricey. Okay.
Awesome. Any final notes from your side, Sam, or we good to wrap it on up here?
Yeah, I'm good to wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining us. We do love providing resources and help for founders, so we invite you to book a consultation with us. Happy to try to offer any insight and help that we can. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we have a pitch deck service. We have self-paced training. We have live hands-on coaching. Lots of ways we can help. We love helping founders succeed.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for attending. Looking forward to connecting with some of you after this, and we'll go from there. Everyone have a great Tuesday.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
Cheers, guys.